things that are nothing to you now were big to you then and big to her or him right now, meaning your sons as well.
Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I am Lucas.
And I'm Erik.
Erik and Lucas are licensed professional counselors, and today we're going to continue our series, 5 Mistakes Dads Make with Their Teenage Daughters.
And did you write down what the sub point for like today's
I
episode
have no
was?
idea.
I have
But
no idea.
That's what you're for. I just do the opening.
Right. You're just like the Vanna White.
Right. I just do the start, and then you take it from there with the actual
Vanna White
content.
That's awesome.
Welcome to Wheel of Fortune. Okay.
So our sub point here on part 2 is sub point. I don't know, close enough. Not being vulnerable and emotionally available. Erik, are you implying that men have sometimes a difficulty with their emotions and being emotionally available to anyone?
You know, that's interesting that you say that because I just saw a little clip from Dana White the other day, who is one of the owners of the UFC.
Which I still can't get over the fact that his name is Dana, because I always have to go in my head, all right, that's a man.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And it was just a little clip, so I didn't know what it was before it, but he was talking about how, you know, one thing that his wife hates is that he doesn't really deal with emotions. He doesn't, you know, and he was talking about, you know, how, you know, in today's society, you have a lot of people, a lot of men who are getting all caught up in their emotions, and so they can't do things, and they can't, you know, they get stuck. And he's like, I don't even think about my emotions. I have a family. I get up, I go to work. That's it. I don't care how I feel. It doesn't matter how I feel. I go to work. I do what I need to do.
So he would have blended in really well in like the 1950s.
Well, you know, I think later on, you know, you've got, you know, kind of the John Wayne persona that kind of came, you know, with some of those different pieces. And Dana is, you know, a type A personality from what I've been able to see, and he's very efficient at what he does. And I think there's some pieces to where you can take your emotions and they don't have to shut you down and make you a puddle, which is, I think, what he's addressing as to what he's seeing.
Well, there's like problems at most ends of most spectrums.
Right.
And he's talking about, I'm over here and anyone who's over here has a problem. And it's like, okay, well, how about, can you meet in the middle?
And that's the thing is that, and I've heard him talk about his emotions at different times in different, you know, venues. But I think men overall, this is, you know, one thing that we struggle with is being able to really have a good handle on emotions. And then when you have a daughter and she then gains more of the emotions that she's going to be getting with the changes that to her body that she's having as she's growing and becoming a woman, there's going to be emotions there. And our society doesn't do well with emotions. Most men are taught, when it cries, make it stop. Just make it stop.
Stop.
Whatever that means. You know, my kingdom for make it stop. You know, and so kind of.
Mm-hmm. So like we're talking about men having a tendency toward maybe problem solving rather than like emotional intelligence. I don't know if those are the right words that I'm looking for. But I don't know if like your daughter's puberty is a problem to be solved.
Well, it's not.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
So like problem solving, not the right tool for the situation.
And it's not that a boy going through puberty doesn't have emotions.
Oh,
you
sure.
know, you have a lot of different slices of the human being. And, you know, some are going to be more emotional, whether they're male or female, and some are going to be less emotional, whether they're male or female. You know, you've got to get a good read on your kids and see what you can do to be able to interact in their world. If you have more than one, the odds are you're going to have some differences. And, you know, so when their emotions are there, problem solving is not going to be, you know, the best thing to do with your daughters. They need to learn that they can solve their problems, but they need somebody that will hear them and sit with them and support them as they're feeling and expressing and letting loose their emotions. One of the number one ways that women and girls let their emotions flow through is through talking and talking about emotions and splinter talking about emotions of other situations. And they may, in those conversations, emotions rise, tears may fall a little bit. It's a part of that process and a part of that outlet.
I suppose you could potentially look at it from the perspective of the best way to, quote, solve the problem is by listening. Like the
You
most
could do that.
the most effective way to get to a good outcome is simply by listening and demonstrating that you are hearing, and that will, quote, solve the problem probably the most efficiently.
And
So depending on how you want to look at it.
I think a lot of guys like learn that after they, right after they get married and their wife is like, oh, I have this problem. And it's like, oh, well, I can solve that. Here's the answer. And then you learn that's not necessarily what they were looking for. They wanted you to listen to the thing and get all in that. And so in that same kind of way, I think sometimes guys can just go straight to that, solve the problem, fix it. And you have to learn to not do that.
One, and it's understanding the difference in the neurology, well, not the neurology, but the neural pathways in how our brains think between men and women. And as men, we'll come up with a solution, and then we will, when we get stuck, or if we have that solution, we'll like find someone, that's close and we trust their judgment, and we'll throw that out in front of them. That means it's okay to make suggestions and help to solve the problem. Women don't do it like that, and the expression of the problem is just them trying to let the emotions vent out of their system. And either they have a solution or they will then find the solution. But they just needed to be able to put those emotions in a way that flush out.
There was another suggestion I was reading. This was in a couples counseling book, but I think it kind of also applies, was just the idea of like, if you have the idea in your head that you want to solve the problem, you can say out loud, am I here to listen or solve the problem? You let me know. Cause like, I want to like not put my foot in my mouth here. So, but that would require an inner awareness of your tendency to want to solve the problem, and then the ability to be willing to ask the other person. In this case, like if your daughter's coming to you crying, right? Honey, am I here to solve the problem or listen? And I think there could absolutely be a place for that. Just kind of like upfront, like, hold on, what do you need right now?
No, good communication, there's always going to be a place for that. And as you get to know your child, so spend time with your child, then you're going to have a better read when they come to sit with you or talk with you as to what they need. But if you're not sure, that's a great way to be able to try and find out, and they may even say, I don't know, as they cry.
That's the answer though.
Yeah. And that is an answer. And so as you let them cry and you listen and you help them be heard, they may actually come to the place where they go, okay, now maybe I do need help solving it, or, okay, I'm going to go work on this.
All right. Now what do I do? Yeah, depending on what kind of approach you get from such a situation. So what else do we need to say about emotionally vulnerable men?
I don't know that it's so much what do we need to say about emotionally vulnerable men as it is, don't be afraid of your daughter's emotions. And look at it. I like what you said. Look at it as, okay, a way of helping to solve the problem is to just listen to her and help her feel heard. Also, remember when you were her age, things that are nothing to you now were big to you then, and big to her or him right now, meaning your sons as well. So if they're stressing over a chemistry test and, she's put in so much work and she's put in so much study and she is just falling apart because she doesn't feel like she's going to be able to do this, she just needs you to hear her and then at some point encourage her, maybe even reminding her of, there are other times where you felt like this and how did that go? If it is a subject that she really struggles in, just being able to help her see that doing her best is what you're looking for, and if that doesn't work, you guys will be able to put your heads together and figure something out. It's not going to ruin her life, so you put in that big picture thinking of, your life is going to be much bigger than this moment, but this moment is really big right now, and that's okay.
Well, and I don't even know maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I suspect not. Like, I don't have to go back to my childhood to remember things that were emotionally overwhelming, right? Like, adults have the capability of having big picture thinking, but when our emotions get overwhelmed, that goes out the window. And it's super easy to have experiences in my own life as an adult where I think to myself for moments of time, this is terrible and it's gonna, right?
Yep.
And so if I can simply remember that when myself or my spouse or anyone is having an emotionally kind of explosive moment, just like, okay, this isn't going to last forever, but it feels like it right now. Because like I need to tell myself that on a regular basis. Like, oh yeah, like by tomorrow, this is going to seem like so much different than it does today.
Sometimes remembering, like when you were their age, helps to put, like really, you're falling apart over an A-, really? I mean, an A- or a B+, or okay, you didn't get into the chess club. Why is that a big? And then remembering, okay, wait, when I was your age, there are some equivalent things that I saw. Okay, because your thinking has changed.
Oh yeah,
and so but I like also what you're saying is because there are still going to be times where we can't see the forest through the trees, like the one you're standing right in front of.
Right. The tree that feels like it's about to fall on your head.
Exactly. And you can't get around it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good example.
And I think it's good to try to remember when you were a child, too. Just, there may be people listening to this like, I can't remember that far back. It's like, I don't know, man. Remember last week when you were sitting at a traffic light and you wanted to kill the guy in front of you because, like, we're not endorsing killing anyone at traffic lights because the light had turned green and, you just...
They're still there on their phone?
And you lost your, blew a gasket. But, yeah. And it's like with so many of this stuff, like, we'll sometimes have exchanges where it's like, well, try this. Well, no, try this. And that's the idea of like, there's lots of approaches to this. There's lots of tools. There's lots of ways in, because like, we're obviously not all the same people. We're going to approach, like, if we all had teenage daughters, well, they'd all be different people and we're all different people, and having a good outcome to that relationship is going to look different depending on who they all are.
I had somebody last night that we were talking about parenting things, and she said to me, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah.
But I am thinking this, and I'm like, that's great. This is a springboard because you know your child best, of which she led off by, I did not think you could get a whiteboard in the mail broken. And I'm like, what? She goes, I didn't think you could break those things. Hers was shattered like it had been run over.
I suspect I might know what happened to it.
Yeah, right. And so she had to order a new one that she's working on a schedule for her and her daughter.
Oh, this was supposed to be a parenting tool, and it arrived in pieces.
And it arrived in many pieces. And she's like, I didn't know the company that would happen, And I'm like, yeah, me neither. I've never heard of that. But I suspect if you run over it with a forklift, it happens.
Oh, gosh. Forklifts are brutal, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of weight there.
So we continue to suggest, and you had said it another time during this podcast, of like, know your child, and then like approach your child. Be willing to be with your child, even when their hormones may be, turbocharged, or there may be tears, or just because like disengaging from your child is probably just a worse outcome, right?
Very much so. I had a situation over the weekend where my son, I was talking to him about accepting responsibility, and he let me know that was just not the reality of him in life.
Oh, okay.
And
I do love that response. Dad, that just doesn't work for me.
That just isn't me. And I'm like, okay, so because it's one of those moments where you have to turn and pivot as a parent. And this is not an argument. This is not a discussion, but I am gleaning information from being involved in his life. And so at that moment, I'm saying, maybe this is why you keep getting kicked out of gaming guilds online, is that you don't take responsibility and you can be a bit pushy. You're a really nice guy. You really are. You're a good guy. But when you want something, you really go after it and after it and after it, and you don't necessarily take responsibility for any of that.
Yeah.
We're not discussing this. I'm just stating this. And so it's not a negotiable conversation. And I'm just saying it's okay to actually say, you know what, I did that, and now I'm just going to move on from that. What do I need to do? And I just moved on at that point to doing another piece of the project we were working on. But I know him well enough to know that if it's just presented in such a way, it will land and he will think about it.
Right.
And so he has. Later that night, he's then calling me on, accountability that I was just joking about. But he's like, isn't this a place where you should take, accountability? I'm like, well, if I did it, and so if I did it, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it, but I don't even know if I did it. But he wouldn't have said that without that conversation.
But in the positive perspective, like, he was thinking about it.
He was thinking about
It's like, okay, this is good. You're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying not to take all of this stuff personally. And then you're like, this isn't an argument I was trying to win with him. I'm just going to share some information and then he can like move forward with it.
Right. Or not.
Right.
Yeah.
You weren't arguing with him about it.
No. And if he doesn't move forward with it, and, it's kind of like the day that he decided after he turned 18, there's something in Western society that when a child turns 18, they've hit this magic mark that they are now an adult and they don't have to do anything. Nothing.
They don't have to do anything. No, newsflash. It's when you get to do more.
Have you been watching the people you live with who have been adults longer than you've been alive? We do stuff.
We do stuff.
It just, how do you think this stuff happens that you see us doing? I mean, no, he just had in his mind, no, you don't do stuff. And then he went one step farther and he decided to rearrange the kitchen the way he wanted it to be.
Because he was suddenly an adult living in someone else's house.
It was his house too, so he could just make that, and he's like, well, what do you think? Oh, yeah. I said, you know what? I'm just going to leave the house now because your mom's coming back soon and I'm not going to be here for the bloodbath. So I'll let you work with this with her. And his eyes just got big and I left.
You weren't arguing with him.
No, as I'm leaving, he's like, I need help switching it back.
Wait, what do you mean?
I'm like, I think you understand what I mean. You don't do that to your mom's kitchen. And I don't know many women in America that you would be able to do that to. You just walk in and switch things around.
Your 18-year-old son decides that it's his house now.
Right. We had that happen one time. We had a person that, a friend, and she was going to make something in the kitchen. And she had offered to just do this, hey, let me make this for you guys. In order for her to do that, she had to switch everything in the kitchen to be the way she was comfortable with it being.
Never mind. I didn't need it so much.
I was like, this is another place where I'm leaving. Your food better be really good.
Right. So of the skills that you can learn, we recommend approaching your children and not necessarily leaving and fleeing simply because there are tears, but then also sometimes leaving and disengaging is the correct tool. So there's so
this
many
is an art.
There's so many variables here.
Because tears are taught to women in the West that they are something that can be used manipulatively.
Oh, who's that? Dr. Siegel, don't negotiate with a terrorist.
Right.
If they're using them manipulatively, whatever it is.
But you have to know your kids to know if that's the case. And having a good teamwork with your significant other is a good way of, because if you don't see it as a guy, but she sees it as a woman, that's good to be able to have that powwow.
Yeah. Use your partner, use their strengths, and absolutely. So we've got more to say about dads and teenage daughters. I think, what do we have? 5 points here in this little mini series, and we'll have to get to some more.
Yeah, so definitely if you missed the first one, make sure to go back and check that out and then subscribe so that you can see our future ones, and check out our website, empoweringchoices.community, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.